Hello, this is Matt Moser of Mosersoft.com. I am a partner with Alchemy Solutions, and today what I'd like to be able to cover with you is the ability for your applications to connect to a SQL Server database. In a prior tutorial, we showed how we can connect using connection strings within our app.config file. I have that same app.config file located here, and that got generated by, if we right click again, our COBOL Runtime Environment Setup utility. Quite a powerful tool. And today what I want to do is be able to cover with you the app.config in combination with our COBOL Runtime Environment Setup utility to connect to an ODBC source this time, which is a little bit different, and but quite easy to do. So without too much conversation, we're going to go ahead and do that right now. So again, overview of the program. These are our valid connection codes to the SQL Server database, 01000, connection OK to MDB, which is Microsoft Access Database. They're slightly different return code, and then we have our code contained within here, which is our SQL begin and declare and our ends, working storage variables that we'll wind up using most likely in a future tutorials, although this one we will check for status open, our declare for our cursors, which has to happen again, end SQL and execute. The pairs have to match in order to be valid COBOL. And here's our execute SQL connect to default and execute. And notice the default, which is what we're using within ours. We'll show you how you can adjust that in a few minutes. Anyway, continuing on, the program would run down to here and check whether or not the connection was good and display whether or not the connection was good. So as we move along, I'm going to go ahead and add to our app.config that we already have. We created that fresh in the prior tutorial, and I'm going to go back to our COBOL Runtime Environment Setup utility. And again, please don't work and save in the same environment using this tool as well as working on the app.config at the exact same time. You can confuse things when you do that. So I'm going to come in here to my server list. I'm going to add a new setting, and in this one I'm going to name SQL Server, my SQL Server. I'll just call it SQL Server ODBC to try to keep things simple, versus my prior SQL Server, which happens to be a connection string. So we'll click here, and in order to find out my ODBC, I already have ODBC up and running. I apologize for that being up, kind of gives you a better picture of the window. And we'll go ahead and we'll click on, I have my administrative tools here. I have my ODBC connection. In this case, the name of my ODBC connection is Laptop SQL Server. And we can real quickly show you through ODBC how we can verify that this is good. Again, this is meant to be a tutorial for the COBOL side. If you need some assistance with this, I can help there too. And I just clicked OK. I'm going to click test my data source. So I know that my data source is good. My test completed successfully. Click OK. And I'm going to cancel out of here or click OK, and I know this is good. So Laptop SQL Server. We have to remember that name because we're going to come back into our DB connection and to our tool that's up and running, and I'm going to put in here Laptop SQL Server and press enter. In this particular case, I showed in the prior tutorial, I'm using Windows authentication so that I'm not having to use the SQL user ID and password. It's my local PC, so I'm not too worried. And so We'll come back up to here. We'll notice server list. Notice they both say ADO.NET. ADO.NET, if you can kind of associate it with your SQL string, your connection string from before, this SQL Server ODBC, you need to change it to ODBC. If you don't and you leave it with a default, you'll get a Fujitsu error, which I'll cover in another tutorial coming up shortly. But you always got to make sure that's changed. We'll click Save, and I'm going to exit out of this particular routine. File, exit, and we'll look at the app config. It says it was modified. Yes, it was, right by that routine. And now we have a SQL Server ODBC server name, which is pointing to our laptop SQL Server. Our default, however, is pointing to my SQL Server, which happens to be this one. In this particular case, we want to test it against SQL Server ODBC. So we're going to copy that down. And again, you want to be careful where you're working when you're setting up your defaults. You could do this through the Runtime utility, but I want to show both the app config and the way you can modify it with the COBOL Runtime setup utility. Click Paste. We now have all the information in there that we need. And we're now, our default is going to point to SQL Server ODBC, which points here, which points to our SQL Server laptop server through SQL Server ODBC. So all that being said, we'll save this and we'll go back to our COBOL program, and we have our breakpoint set here. And if anything comes up, that's actually a good thing because we can cover how to resolve it. Click on Start Debugging. I'm executing the program. We're now here. We're going to connect to default, and you could have actually entered the name of your connection that you set up in your runtime environment utility, which we'll do in a future video. So if I click Run, it's taking a minute to run. I have an awful lot running on this machine right now. And you'll notice that your connection is 01000. Connection OK to SQL Server is 01000. And I check for both. It's probably not the best logic in the world, but it's what I'm doing for this particular demo. SQL state, in this particular case, is S1T00. You might ask, why is that? It did fail. It took a long time to run. The reason that is because I had still had this open from a prior connection, so this particular connection is not good. So I'm going to go ahead and do my debug, stop debugging, and I'm going to rebuild this particular connection because I changed it around in my app.config. So I'm going to say build db connect to SQL Server and then re-execute. So always good when different things come up we're not expecting. Click Run. Notice how quick that was. We came in 01000. My SQL state is 01000. Yep, we're connecting. And we run, and our connection was okay. Press any key to continue. We'll do that. And so as a recap, our app.config showed up here. We had to change our ADO.NET down here to ODBC, and we connect and ran fine. So that's it for this tutorial. Hope you have a great day, and there'll be more tutorials to follow. So take care. Thanks. Bye.